Hi, I'm Mary Kopczynski, the CEO of Regulator. Welcome to this week's Regulatory Roundup. These are the most relevant and interesting alerts from the 5,798 we had last week. The Regulator of the Week is, you guessed it, the SEC again. I never thought I would reach a point where I viewed leadership changes at regulators the same way people would view a baseball player being traded, but here I am. Last week, Allison Herron-Lee at the SEC gave notice that she will not seek a second term as commissioner. I will miss her thoughtful statements on SEC rules. This week, the SEC raised a lot of eyebrows by proposing rule changes for companies to include climate-related disclosures in their registration statements and periodic reports. There is plenty of disagreement between the commissioners and other regulators, including House and Senate members, Treasury, and here's why. Most of the objections are arguing that it's not the SEC's job to police climate risk and that this will force all publicly traded companies, including those where climate risk has material impact, to report on global warming data. On the other hand, the U.S. is right now one of the only major countries in the world that hasn't addressed the risk of climate change on our economy. Some folks also think the point here is about investors. And if you are an investor in a company, you have the right to know material risks that a company is taking. And it is a legitimate possibility that climate change will have material risks to your investments. Also this week, the SEC is proposing to revise the definition of exchange so it incorporates certain companies involved in the trading process be bound to register with the regulator. So if you are a fintech involved with alternative trading systems or otherwise a support to exchanges, I would take a look to see if this would impact you. The topic of the week is Russia, Ukraine, and now Belarus. FinCEN issued an alert to report any transactions with Russian elites and their family members. This could be related to real estate, luxury goods, and other high-value assets. So even if you're just some rich Joe Schmo about to buy a cool-looking boat, you better do your diligence and make sure the owner isn't related to any of the sanctioned individuals. When in doubt, report, report, report. Also, the UK has formally suspended its participation in tax treaties with Russia, so my FATCA and global tax friends, make note of that. Overall, there were a whopping 164 alerts on this topic of the week, but I'm still focusing in on how the US states are responding to this. Alaska is working to ban any state investments in Russia. Georgia is trying to prevent Russian companies forbidding any state government contracts. Maryland is banning its state pension system from having any Russian investments. And finally, Utah is prohibiting Russian brand imports. For those of you following the LIBOR transition, a big Easter egg came through early. Last week, Biden signed the Consolidated Appropriations Act, which sent a whopping $13 billion to Ukraine, but it also contains critical legislation related to LIBOR that folks have been waiting for. It basically has a plan set up in case your financial institution didn't, and that still hasn't stopped the states from issuing their own. Tennessee, for example, signed into law its own LIBOR Transition Act this week as well. For those of you following labor and employment alerts, the Department of Labor came out with the latest stats, and they're still not great. In the United States, women are paid on average 83% of what men are paid. The weed feed was also pretty exciting this week. California is proposing a new cannabis labeling law where a warning label needs to cover at least 1/3 of the front or principal face of a product. Colorado is proposing to prohibit employers from taking action against an employee for smoking weed. If it's medical, they're allowed to smoke on premise during work hours. If it's for fun, they can do it off the premise during non-working hours. The New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission began accepting license applications for cannabis dispensaries Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. and by 4 p.m. they had 172 applications completed. Finally, the governor of South Dakota, who has been working so hard to defeat Idaho as the least regulated state, just signed 6 medical cannabis and hemp bills into law. So that's it this week for Regalytics. We have the most comprehensive, coherent, and customizable regulatory alerts tool in the world. Come and see how company after company is transforming their compliance with this kind of transparency. See you next Wednesday.